When a relationship feels shaky, you don't speak up, you spend. Not to be generous, but to keep someone from leaving. And the scariest part is, your body thinks this is love. You don't do it consciously. You don't call it control. You tell yourself you're just being supportive, understanding, mature. But what's actually happening is quieter and more dangerous. The moment tension shows up, your nervous system looks for the fastest way to make it stop. And money works faster than honesty, faster than vulnerability, faster than asking a question you're not sure you want the answer to. You pay more, you fix more, you cover gaps before anyone asks, because somewhere in your past, love felt unstable and contribution felt like protection. So when something feels off now, your body doesn't reach for conversation, it reaches for relief. Spending lowers the emotional temperature, the argument softens, the distance shrinks. Your body exhales. That relief gets encoded as safety, and your brain learns a dangerous lesson very quickly. Money keeps love close. This is where people get uncomfortable because they think control always looks aggressive, demands, anger, threats. But this kind of control looks polite, self-sacrificing. You don't take power by force, you take it by overgiving, by absorbing discomfort, so you never have to risk hearing no. Money becomes a way to stay relevant without asking to be chosen, a way to avoid the moment where you might find out how secure the connection actually is. And because it works in the short term, your nervous system keeps choosing it. Over time, this trains you to confuse regulation with connection. You don't feel close because you're understood. You feel close because you prevented loss. And the more money does that job, the less space there is for honesty. Needs start to feel dangerous. Boundaries feel like threats. Asking feels risky. So you replace communication with contribution. You become valuable instead of visible, useful instead of honest. And here's the part most people miss. Every time money works, it makes the next conversation harder, because now your body expects payment, not presence, to restore safety. Silence starts to feel responsible. Discomfort starts to feel selfish. You tell yourself you're being low maintenance, easy to love. But what you're really doing is training yourself to disappear slowly. This is where resentment starts, but it doesn't explode, it leaks. It shows up as exhaustion, as quiet bitterness, as a strange emptiness even when things are fine. You start fantasizing about escape while telling yourself nothing is wrong, because part of you knows you're paying to avoid something, a truth, a need, a possible rejection. But another part of you is terrified that if you stop paying, everything collapses.
That's not generosity. That's fear negotiating for attachment. And fear is very convincing when it thinks it's protecting you. This is where it stops being about money and starts being about identity. Somewhere along the way, you built a self-image around being the stable one, the helper, the reliable one, the one who doesn't need much. You learned early that being easy kept relationships intact, that being low drama kept people close. So now, speaking up feels like becoming a problem. Asking feels like risking your role. If you stop paying, fixing, absorbing, who are you in the relationship? What value do you bring if you're not useful? This is the quiet identity trap. You don't just fear losing them, you fear losing the version of yourself that felt necessary. So you keep spending to protect that identity. Because if love only stayed when you were convenient, then being inconvenient feels unsafe. Money lets you avoid that moment of truth. It lets you stay chosen without testing whether you're wanted as you are. Over time, this distorts your sense of worth. You start measuring your value by how much you can carry without complaint. You pride yourself on not needing, on not asking, on hoarding it together. But underneath that pride is constant vigilance. You're always scanning for signs that things might fall apart. And that vigilance keeps your nervous system stuck in maintenance mode instead of connection. You're managing the relationship instead of being in it. And nothing creates loneliness faster than being valued for what you provide instead of who you are. Here's the deeper mechanism underneath all of this. Your nervous system learned an early rule. Closeness is unstable, but usefulness buys time. When emotional safety wasn't guaranteed, contribution became protection. So your brain built a shortcut. Threat appears, anxiety spikes, spend to stabilize. That loop is powerful because it works. Money reduces friction. It postpones abandonment. It creates temporary calm. And your nervous system doesn't care about fairness or long-term cost. It cares about survival. So it repeats what works. Emotional risk starts to feel reckless. Financial sacrifice starts to feel loving. You don't experience spending as a choice anymore. You experience it as the fastest way back to safety. That's why even when you promise yourself you won't do it again, your body moves before your logic does. You pay before you think. You offer before you ask. You fix before you feel. And slowly, money replaces boundaries. It replaces voice. It replaces discomfort. You stop noticing what you want because preventing loss feels more urgent than expressing truth. This is how imbalance becomes normal. This is how overgiving starts to feel like love. And because this pattern lives in the body, not the mind, insight alone doesn't stop it.
You can understand it perfectly and still feel the urge to spend when tension shows up. That's why this pattern feels compulsive. It's not about money management, it's about regulation. Money became your substitute for boundaries, for voice, for emotional risk. And once money is doing that job, it can never feel neutral again. It's charged, tied to attachment. Which is why the idea of stopping doesn't feel responsible. It feels dangerous. Because your body isn't afraid of losing money. It's afraid of losing connection. Here's another reveal people don't like hearing. This pattern doesn't just affect how you give. It affects who you choose. You're more likely to attach to people who need you, not because you want imbalance, but because need feels familiar. Need confirms your role. Need gives you purpose. Equal partners feel confusing because they don't activate the same survival wiring. So the cycle repeats with different faces, different circumstances, same nervous system script, until you're exhausted and wondering why love always feels like work. Here's the break most people avoid because it feels backward. The pattern doesn't end when you stop spending. It ends when you stop using money to anesthetize anxiety. The real work isn't financial, it's nervous system exposure. It's letting tension exist without immediately neutralizing it. It's noticing the urge to fix, pay, or rescue, and staying present long enough to feel what shows up instead. Fear, guilt, the belief that if you don't handle it, everything collapses. This is where your identity panics. Because if you're not the stabilizer, who are you? If you don't smooth things over, will they stay? And that question is the point. Because any relationship that only survives when you overfunction financially was never secure to begin with. When you remove money from this role, the relationship is forced to reorganize. Either communication replaces compensation, or the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't about becoming cold or withholding. It's about letting money be money again, instead of emotional glue. The discomfort you feel when you don't spend is the same discomfort that builds boundaries, self-trust, and real intimacy if you let it pass through. It teaches your body that connection doesn't have to be purchased. And here's the darkest part most people never admit. Using money to control love doesn't just protect you from abandonment. It slowly trains you to tolerate emotional absence. Because when you're busy maintaining stability, you stop noticing what's missing. You stop asking whether you feel seen, whether you feel chosen freely, whether love actually feels warm. Money keeps things functioning, but it also keeps you distracted, focused on logistics instead of intimacy. Over time, your standards quietly drop, not because you want less, but because wanting more feels unsafe. You tell yourself this is just how relationships are, that this is adulthood, commitment, responsibility. But underneath that story is a quieter truth. You learned that love requires payment, and now anything that doesn't demand sacrifice feels unfamiliar, even suspicious. So the final question isn't whether someone would stay if you stop spending. It's whether you've ever been in a relationship where love didn't quietly require you to disappear first. Because if you haven't, how would you even recognize it when it shows up?